Welcome everybody, day 2 of Trailgating here, broadcasting from the Freetrail Chalet is what we're calling it here in the heart of Chamonix, France. My name is Dylan Bowman, joined again by Corrine Malcolm. Corrine, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I am so much more awake today than I was yesterday.
Did you get any sleep last night?
I slept so good.
I actually did too.
I'm in this little cubby hole of a bunk bed, and it's like a little cave. It was so comfy.
I feel much better today. I feel like my brain is working a little bit better. Also joining us again, Mr. Matt Daniels. Matt's been here for a month, so he's perfectly adjusted, well rested. How you doing, Matt?
I'm good, man. I just crushed a Red Bull too, so let's go.
Let's go. Okay, so today's show, we are going to be focusing on OCC and CCC. There is racing happening right now on the TDS course, and there was racing that happened today in the ETC events. We'll close down the show by talking about that a little bit, but we'll focus on previewing the action in the World Finals at 50K distance and the 100K distance at OCC and CCC, respectively. Before we get to it, a big thank you to the guys behind the scenes, Tony with a Sony and Ryan with a Fuji. Big thanks to those guys. Harmony with us in spirit back home on the ones and twos on the social media. While you're here, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, please. We would really appreciate it if you did. Again, this is day 2 of our broadcast. Tomorrow we'll be back with the UTMB preview. Thursday, we've got our prediction show, and we'll break down the OCC results. Friday, we're going to be out on the race course, so no show on Friday. Saturday, we're back with the instant recap show and the CCC results. And then we'll wrap everything up on Sunday with just the full weekend recap. Of course, there is also the Freetrail happy hour. So if you're a Freetrail member, come over to the chalet on Wednesday. Information in Slack about that. We would love to share a sparkling water or a French wine with you tomorrow night. Fantasy, go to fantasy.freetrail.com. We're picking 10 deep in OCC, CCC, and UTMB, the top 3 predictors in those events. We'll get head-to-toe kits from HOKA along with some swag from us here at Freetrail. And also make sure you, while you're there on fantasy.freetrail.com, if you're a real stats nerd, go check out Travis's new feature. Go to the stats tab, navigate to splits, and then you can see historical splits from all 3 of the World Finals now. Travis shipped that today. UTMB, CCC, and OCC splits now up on fantasy.freetrail.com. Big thank you to HOKA for sponsoring our coverage here today. Couldn't do it without them. Panel starting with OCC. The race starts at 8:15 a.m. on Thursday over in Orcier, Switzerland. We're going to start by talking about the course. So if our good buddy Tony can pull up a quick graphic for our audience here. The course is 35 miles, roughly 11,400 feet of climbing. Matt, maybe get us started here. As you look at the OCC course, maybe just break it down for the audience. If you were lining up on Thursday, how would you be thinking about it?
Man, so there's a major change. We're going back to the course from 2022. And that's probably going to add for the men, I would say the top men anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes onto the times run from last year. And for the women, probably anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes at the front end of the women's race. And so and that section, I think, is a little bit more beefier and technical. And I believe you kind of climb up onto like a little bit of a ridge. I haven't run that section.
It's actually bouldery, in sections. Yeah. Like it's like they're kind of some rock hopping. It's definitely more technical, which will be a strength for some individuals, but it's not kind of the clear 4 distinct climbs. It creates a much longer climb in the middle of the race.
Right. Yeah. And isn't there a big there's a big hut up there at the top of Col de Balme, right? Yeah. So it's a popular hiking destination, I think. We're going to go up there on Thursday. I can't wait. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I mean, so if I was racing it, I would probably, get out hard and get to that hut and have a beer and chill, and then I would send it down. No, honestly, I think, it's going to be a crucial point in the race for a lot of athletes. And I think, being kind of smack dab in the middle of it, you got to play your cards right early and play to your strengths. And so just be ready for some fast running, but also still some steep climbing to go after that.
Corrine, how would you be thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think what ends up, well, it's also going to be warm, or more than likely, definitely warmer than last year.
High 70s predicted.
2021 and 2022 were fairly warm years. And I was talking to Robbie Simpson before I came over here. He struggled mightily in the heat both those years. In 2022, I believe, when that was happening, there's actually like a little bit of a creek that runs kind of in part of that zone. And he like laid down in it and like sat there for we were like, where's Robbie? Like all of a sudden we had a new race leader. It was super confusing, but it's because he was literally laying in this creek trying to cool down because he was so hot and just like so uncomfy. And then he had a great back 90 minutes of the race. But I do think this race goes out so hot these days. Like people race really aggressively. Allie Mack took that race out super aggressively.
We'll talk about her in a sec.
And so what does happen though, is that you get to La Flégère way more tired, I think, way more cooked. And then you've got this kind of technical, fast downhill that you have to be ready to send it on, because you're not going to have a 5-minute lead on someone. You're going to have a 90-second lead or a 30-second lead on someone. And I think that you can mess it up and you could lose the podium or lose the win on the final descent into town.
You know, I think that's something that is under discussed as it relates to UTMB week in general. The final descent for all 3 of the world finals is the most technical part of the entire course.
Yeah, outside of the pyramids, probably, right? Like it's incredibly technical up high, and it's brutal. Like, were you in the booth with me when Mimi Kotka was like slowly making her way down to the podium? But it was like we had a camera on her that entire descent, and like her knees were super messed up, and it was like a really horrible 5K to watch. That's what every single racer experiences.
And before we started, you reminded me about when Shayla Aviles, on her way to victory, took a huge tomahawk on that final descent.
Yeah. So we will likely see some carnage out there, both like with melties happening, like physiological meltdowns, but also like potential like crashes and falls as well. Also, I mean, last year in the women's OCC race, it was a drag race between Katie Scheid and Yao Miao for second and third, going over the metal staircase that crosses the road before you get to town. It's like, you don't want to be duking it out with anyone at that point. So I think
it was the same way in the men's race last year.
Yeah. So it's going to be a little bit warmer, which is going to be a factor. You're a little bit exposed up there, and you might come to La Flégère way more tired. And so I think it's about, you can't sit back in this race. You won't be in contention. You won't be in contention for a podium. You might not be in contention for a top 10. Someone that we might talk about later, Nick Handel, for example, ran one of the fastest like final thirds of the race last year, like from a Strava perspective, but like ran out of real estate essentially because he went out too easy.
Finishing 11th,
like just barely missing the top 10. And so I think the only person who ran that section faster than him was Stian and Francesco.
Wow.
And so it's like he ran actually, Manuel might have been in that group as well. Like, I think he might have been faster than Francesco, but slower than Manuel. So it's like, you gotta put it all out there. I think in this race, you can't sit up, you can't take a break. You've got to be on, and there's no crude aid stations in this race as well. And so we are in a high carb world where that means that athletes are carrying a lot of nutrition on them. They're carrying bottles with powder in them so they can fill them up out on course instead of taking the aid from the course. They're carrying gels. We've got athletes running a 55K with a waist belt and a pack because
they want their own nutrition.
And imagine the people that are out there for 14 hours.
Right.
Like, our leaders will be done under 6 hours, men and women. There are people out there for 14 hours, and there are no crude aid stations.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And I was actually going to go to like the racing dynamic now, and this is a perfect segue because as we look at that course profile that Tony had up on the screen, there's basically 3 key climbs on the course: the La Giette climb, the La Balme climb, and the Flégère climb. And obviously it could go any number of different ways, but I mean, in my mind, it is basically now like it's coming down to that final climb, right?
Big attacks happen there usually.
I remember Francesco last year saying that that's where Stian was able to get that critical final gap on him. And anyway, just for our viewers, and
that's where Allie Mack fell apart.
Right.
For example, like, I think you really have to be able to, the win oftentimes comes on that climb. We've seen John Albin overtake Robbie Simpson on that climb. We've seen the Petter showdown on that climb. Like, that final climb, even all the way up to the very top at La Flégère, there are big moves being made. But but at the same time, there's no place to like take a breather.
Right. Well, that was my point. As you mentioned, Nick Handel, is like, you have to actually be in contact there. Like, you can't be conservative at OCC if you want to finish in the top 10. So anyway, just something for our viewers and listeners to keep their eye out. Let's talk about the competitors who will be keeping this as dramatic as humanly possible. Notable scratchers in the race first. We've got Ingvild Kaspersen not stepping to the start line due to injury. Nuria Jill, a past podium finisher here, not coming to the start line, not sure why. Also Bailey Kowalczyk not coming to OCC, evidently. I don't know if you guys have any insight on that.
I don't have insight on Bailey.
I think she just did Sierras and all.
Yeah, she's been over here. I just think that she's like dealing with some funk. Other notables, though, would be Maud Matthews dropping down to ETC and Rachel Drake not making it over here as well.
Okay, so launching into it, Corrine, you get us started on this. In my mind, just looking at it, it's like a rematch of the World Championship from last year. We were talking about this before we got started. Go ahead.
It's 100%. You have the entire women's podium from Worlds last year, and Clement, Judith, and Therese. That's a pretty sizable trio to be at the front. But you also have Zagama champs, Zagama second place, Mont Blanc Marathon second place, and the likes of people like Sarah Alonso and Caitlin Fielder. You could have counted another Sierra Zanal champion, Maud Matthews, before she dropped down. Like, that's a really competitive bunch, and that still doesn't include previous podium finishers of Yao Miao and Dani Moreno, who've both been third here, both who I think are coming in pretty fresh and very fit. And so, it's kind of the who's who of 50K running. We've seen people like Allie Mack stick it or nearly stick it here as well. So I'm really excited about the very front end of this group.
Matt, who are you looking at?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think if Allie Mack kind of goes about how she did a couple years ago when she ran OCC on the same course, it'll be cool to see like what's going to happen with that front group. Is she going to like go out hard and blow up the field, or are we at a point now where if she goes out hard, everybody can kind of stay with her and it's just going to make for a really fast, interesting race? Like, I don't know. Like, I think what I'm most excited for is to see like that contingent that, was in the World Championship, like Corrine was saying, and see if it plays out similar to that too. There's a lot of different dynamics that could happen. And I think with the heat, that's just going to be the biggest factor is like, what's going to happen. I'm not too concerned about the race until after that middle section, that climb up on the technical section. And I think we're going to have a race on our hands after that.
Yeah. So the update that we get from Argentière is going to be the critical one. What's Allie Mack been up to? She's had sort of a quiet season. She was fourth at Broken Arrow, 23K.
I'm not actually sure.
Because typically when she races like high volume, right?
Yeah. So I actually don't know what state Allie Mack is in right there. But other people that we did not mention, Zagama champ Danielle Omes, who finished right behind Rachel Drake here last year. She's a mom, super strong German athlete. Tabor Hemming, who's making her OCC debut, which we are incredibly excited about. Another name, Julia Font Gomez, like is a solid downhiller. She's more kind of a sky runner human being, but would be really strong in this. And then insider scoop from folks in the short distance world is to keep our eyes on, this is kind of our dark horse probably, is another Spanish athlete, Rosa Laura Filou. There, she was fifth at Marathon Mont Blanc behind Sophia Lockley, but supposedly that's kind of who people are keeping their eyes on within that little OCC competitive trail space. That they
repeat her name for me again.
Rosa Laura.
Okay.
Yeah, Spanish athlete who was fifth at Marathon du Mont Blanc this year, is kind of like the sleeper, but is supposedly super fit. And then the other thing to note too is that this is the longest race for some athletes. For Sarah Alonso, it'd be her longest race to date. For Tabor Hemming, it'd be her technically her longest race to date, probably longest time on feet, though she's done stuff like the Joshua Tree Traverse that is technically slightly longer, but
by mileage, but much easier,
much quicker. So it will be super, super interesting to see Tabor make her debut here.
So just for, obviously we've got a global audience, but a lot of Americans. So I'd love to just talk briefly about the top 2 ranked women in the race by UTMB index. Judith Weider is the top ranked athlete, and Clementine Jeffrey Judith, Swiss athlete who we have known for many years. She was, I think, a world champion orienteer before she moved to trail running, and she has been such a great, consistent athlete over many years, also a mother of two. Clementine Jeffrey got the better of Judith by a couple of minutes at the World Championship last year. That was actually the first time I had ever heard of Clementine, and she's been on a heater ever since. She won the European Championships this year as well. So just for our viewers and listeners to keep their eyes on some of these European athletes who we may not hear as much from in the States. Matt, you were talking about Caitlin Fielder before we got started. She's an athlete who I've followed for a long time too. Do you have any insight on her?
Yeah, I mean, you just can't ever bet against her. Yeah. That's what kind of the conversation I was having with Corrine, and every time I kind of leave her out of a race or don't really think about her in a race, she always comes around and is right there in it. So, when I was making my fantasy picks, she was up there. That was kind of what I was thinking.
She was fourth last year.
Yeah, and I think her
an always solid top 5 contender here.
Right, and her 50K Tarawara was really impressive this year, and I think that was probably one of her most recent results that I can think of. And I mean, running.
She's a Kiwi.
4:01 on that, that's fast.
Yeah, that's fast. Kiwi who lives in Girona, Catalonia. So shout out to Caitlin Fielder.
Yeah, a staple in the Golden Trail World Series, had gone up to CCC 2 years ago and back down to OCC last year, raced more on that Golden Trail World Series stage, and has been off to a good start this season as well. I don't think, there'd be any expectation of her not performing well here. She just had a good Sierra Zinal as well. I think a pretty decent Marathon du Mont Blanc. 10th. Yeah, and a good Zagama. So she's had a really solid
10th at both, I think.
Yeah,
this year.
a really super solid opening to the Golden Trail World Series. So I anticipate that Caitlin's in really good form as well.
Awesome.
I think a cool storyline also real quick touch on is what you were saying earlier, Corrine, is how Miao Yao is fresh coming into this race. So
where she wasn't last year.
Right.
So that's a very interesting Yao Miao. She's so fast.
Remember the first time we were introduced to Miao Yao when she absolutely destroyed CCC? Yeah. This was a long time ago.
Went out super, super, super fast, and we're like, there's no way.
Does she still hold the course record for
There's
CCC?
no way. I don't believe so. I do think I think Blondine holds the current course record.
Okay. Anyway, Yao Mao, great.
They might have broken it last year though as well. I feel like every year it gets faster at this point.
Speaking of the Asian continent, the Asian contingent, we haven't mentioned Sunmaya Buddha this year or in today's show, but also one of those, like Mao Yao many years ago, Sunmaya Buddha at CCC 2 years ago when she was second place. It was one of those
Blondine, Sunmaya, Abby. It was a great podium.
But it seems like every year there's something like that happens where somebody who comes from, obscure country who doesn't necessarily have big corporate backing from a big brand just makes a huge splash.
We had a Vietnamese athlete in the top 5 of CCC last year on the women's side. It's just this becoming a more and more global race. I've gotten to meet a lot of the Chinese athletes since touching down yesterday. I'm really excited for this globalization, further globalization of the sport. We know that what's coming out of these Asian countries is they don't get the opportunity to race in Western Europe or the US very often, akin to some of the up and coming Kenyan athletes as well. And so we'll talk more actually, I think, about the African continent in the men's preview. Yep. But I do think that we're not ready to see what Asia has for us, and they're really good.
Before we move off the women, you mentioned Tabor Hemming. We had Tabor and Eli here in studio yesterday. And one of the things that they said that I think is important is that, they race at a high volume and they seek out the most competitive races. They're not afraid to get their teeth kicked in, was the verbiage they used. And I think there's so much value in that in particular. And I'm so excited to see Tabor and Eli here for their first time representing the USA.
And it feels like they haven't over-raced this year. It feels like they've scaled things, but they're still raced a lot, but they've scaled it back a little bit, it feels like. Last year they went on some crazy triples that sort of worked, sort of didn't work. They still have
raced quite a lot.
But I do think that it's exciting to see them at OCC this year.
My point is that when you bring in that short distance, high volume of racing type athlete in, they develop different racing skills,
competitive tools.
Exactly. So now with the direction that OCC has gone, where, you know, the lead pack is likely going to be shoulder to shoulder through Argentière, and then it's a knockdown, drag out battle over the Flagère climb. When you have developed those racing skills, maybe that puts you in a different psychological position than it does to people who focus more on 50K and above type races. So anyway, a fun theme. So just to check something off the list here before we move to the men, just want to acknowledge, deep American field here. So we've mentioned Dani Moreno, Ali Mack, Tabor Hemming, also Robin Lesh, Sam Lewis, Claire Rhodes on the start list. So
yeah, that's very exciting.
Yeah, super, super exciting American contingent. Moving to the men and starting with the notable scratches, there is no Chad Hall. Damn it.
Again, come on, Chad.
We want to see you race here and do it for our entertainment, for nothing else.
Yeah, it's not about you, Chad. It's about us.
Let's crowdfund his plane ticket or something, He's like notably unsponsored.
Freetrail Chad.
Freetrail Chad, yeah. If you wear a bucket hat, Chad, we will buy your ticket next year. That's a promise, okay? Also, Anthony Felber, a great French athlete. Andre Rodriguez, a great Spanish athlete. Also notable scratches. On the men, I'm going to frame this for us here. I view this as the core four, and they happen to be the top 4 ranked athletes in the field. So that's Remy Bonnet, Jonathan Albin, Francesco Puppi, Eli Hemming. My guess is the winner comes out of that quadfecta, and I'd love to just say a few words about each. Matt, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, I mean, that is a big, powerful four athletes. Francesco's coming back from a second place finish last year.
You guys had a battle at Chuck.
We did, man. And
the 50K distance, and Francesco, it's a match made in heaven.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun watching him gradually move up into distance over these next few years. But I just talked to him last night. He's ready. I mean, he felt like he went into Sierras and all a couple weeks ago, not really knowing where his fitness was and not feeling too great. And then he just ran, lights out really well. Historically one of his better times there. So, if you're running one of your better times at Sierras and all, you're probably ready for a race like OCC. Eli, come on, that guy is, one of the best climbers in the game. And then, one thing I think a lot of people overlook is he can descend too. So you have guys like Jonathan Albin who are known to descend really well. And so that could be a crazy cool battle, coming up from Argentière and they are at the top of the lift together before they come into Chamonix. What's that going to look like? Yeah. And then you got Remy Bonnet, who the best climber in the entire world. And so that's a heavy 4. I think one thing I don't want to count out though is Antonio Martin Perez. I mean, he was
2 podiums.
Yeah, third here last year. I've had the opportunity to know him really well since 2017, and he's in it. Every single race he does, he's in it. Yeah.
I think he runs a super, super strong back half. Yeah. That's who it was. It wasn't Manuel. It was Antonio who ran the back half split was the best. And then it was Nick Handel. And it was Nick was 11.
He and Francesco who were on the overpass at the same time last year.
Yeah. Too. Last year I was watching the live feed and I ran up to La Floria, cause I was teammates with Francesco, Nike teammates. And I told him, I was like, Antonio's coming, you gotta go, so it was cool to see that battle. And then Antonio's a good friend too, so I told him, friends right there, and so it'd be cool to see that matchup again. And then you got, gosh, there's so many guys. You got guys like Robbie Simpson.
Yeah, he's the other guy with two podium finishes, and it's really hard. How many top 10s at Sierras and all does he have? He's never won the thing, but how many times has he been?
Yeah. Well, he's been second. Yeah, twice I think. So yeah.
So it's he's been the bridesmaid a lot. And it's just he's super, super solid. Obviously, more and more men are coming up in that field. It's also, we were talking about this before we hit record. No American. Obviously, we can be American centric here because this is not UTMB live. Our American bias can come through, Dylan.
Come on. I'm never ashamed to show my American bias.
of our patriotism for
USA
Trail.
By the way, I'm rooting for Eli Hemming.
Yeah. you're going to be in the red, white, and blue out there. It's going to be great. Costumes appreciated for Eli Hemming. But no Americans have ever won on the women's side or the men's side. No American male has ever podiumed at OCC before Katie Scheide's second place last year, the best finishing American female ever, was Dani Moreno. So we've got 2 podium finishes on the women's side, 0 podium finishes on the men's side. The best placed men thus far have been Jeshrin Small, who's back this year, along with Hayden Hawks. They both have a 5th place finish here. So this could be the first year where we see an American male on the podium, if not an American male winning the race. And that is also very, very exciting. We've cracked the code at CCC on both sides. The men finally cracked the code at UTMB last year. Is this the year that the Americans cracked the code at OCC, particularly on the men's side?
It is.
Let's go. Let's go. So in addition to Eli Hemming, our best chances for that first American podium finish here on the men's side would be Jeshrin Small, who you just mentioned, Darren Thomas, Christian Allen, who we should talk about.
I saw him briefly in town.
He was just here in studio.
I know. I think we probably passed each other by the bridge, basically.
And Nick Handel.
But then I did just double check Instagram because that's how I figure out where people are. That's not creepy. David Norris is here.
Heck yeah.
And I've been waiting there have been so many times that David Norris has been signed up for a race that he hasn't gotten.
Tell the people about David.
So David Norris is a Nordic skier, but he's also a multi-time Mount Marathon champion, including the Mount Marathon, which is the hardest 5K in the world, basically, in Seward, Alaska. He is the course record holder there, and he reset his course record this year at Mount Marathon. He is mega, mega talented. He wins the Cirque Series all the time. Yep. He's an on-sponsored athlete, but he's a Nordic skier, a very, very good Alaskan Nordic skier, makes his home in Colorado. Incredibly talented athlete. Figuring out the running thing. This will be a long race for him, but he could be a surprise. Like, it wouldn't be crazy for David Norris to find himself in the top 10 here. He has the aerobic capacity and the running potential to do that. He has the technical running potential to do that. So if he nails the nutrition, handles the heat okay, he could be an interesting storyline.
Plus, he's an Alaskan, which means he's a tough
They're
mofo.
so tough.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's got the VO2 max to do it. He's got the leg speed to do it. This will be the biggest stage he's ever raced on. So who the heck knows what will happen out there? But if he doesn't nail it this year and he gets the opportunity to come back next year, I wouldn't be surprised to see David Norris figure it out.
I'm so glad you brought him up, Corrine. That will plant a seed in my brain for Thursday of people to be excited to watch. A couple more things I want to touch on the men's side. Benjamin Rubiel. This was the kid who shocked the world and won the world championship.
He shows up for championship races.
Yes, exactly. 2023 Long Trail world champion when that race was held in Innsbruck, Austria. Last year, he was in the field at TDS and DNF.
He was sick, and then he became a cameraman, and he was the one that was filming Stian.
Yes.
Because no one else was going to be able to hang with him.
A great story, right?
An amazing story.
This young kid wins the world championship, steps up to TDS, doesn't have his day, drops out, but picks up a camera to make sure we all had eyes on the great Stian Angermoon, who took home the victory at OCC last year. So shout out Benjamin. And he could be a spoiler to that core four, I think.
100%. Yeah. He's not ranked very high, but he could 100% be a spoiler. Another interesting spoiler that we haven't talked about is Mr. Sammy Chilangat, the African in the field, who I believe is a 2:08 marathoner. Which he ran in 2023. So it's not even like he ran that 10 years ago. He ran it last year.
Pretty sure
2 years ago. Like
he's the first Kenyan athlete, like to be racing at sort of that professional level, like going to be competitive at one of these races.
Yeah, I feel like we've seen them dominate the Golden Trail World Series. We saw really cool performances come out of Joylyn at in her first ever trail race, supposedly at Sierras and All.
Sierras and All.
I heard first ever race.
Yeah. Well, she raced in school, so she's done running races before, but it was her first ever race outside of racing as a school
like a recreational school activity.
Yeah. Well,
and she won Sierras and All.
Yeah.
Not a big deal.
By a bit, by a margin. So I do think that Sammy's a person to keep our eye on. This would be his longest race to date. He qualified at
Chianti.
No, Diale.
Okay, one of the UTMB spring races.
Yeah, it was the French race though. Okay. Ran really strong there. I don't know if it was a full 50K because some of the qualifiers are a bit short. It's like a 35K potentially. Mm-hmm. But 3:33 there. I know it was a good field at that race, but yeah. So he's got some trail experience. He's a 208 marathoner.
Watch out, Sammy.
This is an interesting person, interesting character to add to that top 4 conversation.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to touch on before we move on, Jonathan Albin in particular, he just had a great 6th place at Western States, even though I think he was disappointed by it. He still ran 14.
I think he hated it.
Yeah.
Insider scoop, I'm pretty sure John Albin, because he's not going to listen to this, hated Western States, which is such a fun hot take because we love Western States so much, but I think he absolutely hated it. And that's fine. You're allowed to hate it.
Let's see if he accepts his invitation to come back and rock that M6 bib. But my point was, he was supposed to be in the UTMB field this year, and we were all going to be very excited to see him race there. He has won OCC in the past. He's won CCC last year. And we talked yesterday about how Ruth Croft was the only person who has the chance to bring home the trifecta of victories this year. Jonathan Albin would have been in that conversation if he stayed in the UTMB field. He made the decision to drop down into the OCC field.
Well, initially he was going to do CCC, and then I think he dropped even further to OCC. Really? I think that decision was made yesterday late.
Okay.
So curious to see if that is a mentally sharp John Albin or not, because he's a fighter, right? He's obviously mega talented, but he's also a fighter, and you've got to be ready to fight out there. And I'm just curious to know what his actual headspace is. I mean, we'll find out on Thursday.
Yep. Okay, let's move on to CCC. Before we do, a big thank you to HOKA for supporting our coverage here today and all week. You guys know HOKA. They were founded here in the French Alps, and they just dropped one of their most iconic products ever, and it's only been released for a couple of weeks, the Tecton X3. That's going to be all over the race courses here in the Chamonix Valley this week. So go grab yourself a pair at hoka.com. I stopped by the HOKA base camp over in the expo just a little while ago. And for those who are in the Valley, if you're listening to the show, you got to go check out the upstairs at the HOKA base camp. I'm just going to tell you that. It's an immersive, amazing experience up there on the top floor there. So a big thank you to HOKA. Go check out that new Tecton X3, the hottest new super shoe in trail running. CCC, let's talk about the course first. Again, CCC starts at 9 a.m. on Friday on the Italian side in the beautiful town of Courmayeur, Italy. Tony's going to pull up the graphic for us here. And while he does, given the stats, it's about 62.7 miles, almost exactly 20,000 feet of climbing. Corrine, do you want to talk about the CCC course quickly?
Oh, I can. I would say it's a faster 100K as far as a mountainous 100K goes. There's the great debate every year. Do I use poles? Do I not use poles? It's a real mix. We've seen athletes absolutely front run it, like Yao Miao, for example, like Claire Gallagher actually when she won it, Tom Evans, Hayden Hawks, et cetera, have really pushed what's possible, I think, on that course over the years. What I mean by that too, with this kind of front running mentality, is that I do think that it's an overwhelmingly fast, predictable course. There are major climbs that get really, really hard, section by section, but you start in Courmayeur, you make your way back to Chamonix. So it's CCC in the sense that it's Courmayeur, Champellac, Chamonix, the 3 Cs, those kind of big key locations on the course. But basically I feel like every aid station you're coming in or out of is either you're basically ascending up a big climb or descending down into it, which can be a bit of a mind tussle. But I do think that the big thing there is that while there is a lot of vert gain in the course, it's not flat by any means, there's still so much fast running in it that I think that the overall leg speed and fitness required to fight for a podium spot in it is really, really high. I don't necessarily consider it a mountain athlete course in that sense. I think of it more of a fast runner course. So in my head, for example, a good friend of Freetrail, Hannah Allgood, has run this race. Yep. In my mind, Hannah Allgood is a mountain, where she really accelerates is these mountainous 100Ks, the Eiger, for example. I want to go see her race in Andorra. I want to see her race. TDS would be a weirdly good race for her type of thing if it was a championship level race. And I think CCC, while she'd be capable at it, I think it's really going to speak to the Hayden Hawks, the Blondines, the folks that are these really kind of like thoroughbred 100K. They're
the
gonna
Matt Daniels.
The Matt Daniels. They're gonna perform well at Javelina 100 mile as well.
Is it too late to pick up a bit, bro? I would love.
I would love to. I'm getting major FOMO being here.
You've never run CCC.
I ran CCC in 2022, and I made a wrong turn with another runner coming out of Chambay Lock, and then we got about maybe close to a mile off course before we got back on, and then I took a really bad fall, and at that point I was just
you bailed.
Yeah, it was one of those days.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where it basically runs the back 100K of the UTMB course. There's beautiful moments climbing up the Grand Col Ferret, for example, before you dive down into that half marathon descent into the Swiss side of the race, but I do think that, again, it just honestly, we'll talk about this here in a second, but we've got a lot of women, a lot of the Western States women are doubling up with UTMB. A lot of the Western States men are doubling up with CCC, which we saw Emily Haga do really successfully last year. I think that is a great double. You've got 8 weeks, but I think the training that you put into Western States translates so well to a CCC style race course in the sense that it really favors, I think, someone who can run very quickly.
The timing is not much different. I mean, UTMB or Western States is about a 14-hour to 15-hour race for these guys, and CCC is going to be right around that 10-hour range, so it's not a huge difference.
Yeah, so I think people who've done the Western States training, this transition is way easier than the transition to UTMB or even down to OCC. I think this is a great Western States to CCC double opportunity.
Yeah. So Matt, maybe same question as OCC. If you were stepping to the start line again, how would you be thinking about the course for the viewing and listening audience?
Yeah, I think you have to be patient up the first climb. It's a doozy. Right out of Courmayeur is just, and you take a little bit of a different route than the UTMB route. So you go straight up the single track to Bretonne rather than taking the switchbacks. And so it's a huge climb from the get-go. And I think for a lot of people, if you burn your matches early, it's good luck, because you got Grand Col Ferret coming up not too much longer. That's the thing. The speed in between the climbs is you're at such a high intensity where UTMB you can kind of relax a little bit and enjoy it. But for me, I think an important part of the race is especially for guys with a lot of leg speed, is to kind of use that climb going up into Chambay Lock. It's not too steep. It's kind of American grade running is what I like to call it. And, for a lot of athletes, that's a crucial point in the race. If they can kind of get into Chambay Lock first and out of that aid station and then into the next climb, going up, what's the,
it's the Lodgiac climb.
Yeah. If you can get a head start on that climb and just take your time, because it's a long one, you're in a good place over the rest of the course.
So just reinforcing something that you guys have both said. I mean, in my mind, CCC, like UTMB, is a big speed trap, right? The fast running happens in that first 50K. You can think of it as two individual 50Ks. The first one being smoother and faster, and the second one a lot tougher.
Yeah, because the newer climb out of Triant is super, super steep, and then the way you come into Vallorcine is also quite technical. And so I do think you're right. There is kind of there's still fast running in that section, the tiny, stupid, flat climb out of Vallorcine. Yep. You have to be able to run, but there is a lot of much quote unquote smoother running, along the balcony, for example, or the downhill half marathon into La Folie. As more speed oriented.
As we were watching the CCC broadcast, watching Shen and Dakota rip down town, towards the bottom of the end of that half marathon descent.
Yeah, on the road into La Folie. They were running so fast. It goes to Matt's
point of just you have to be on the gas pedal. And in UTMB, you see runners at that same section, and it looks like a jog. In CCC, it looks like a tempo.
Yeah. Yeah, 100% would agree with that. And I think that, we saw some hard charges early by our friend Seth going up Grand Col Ferret and wasn't quite able to stick the landing, still pulled off a really amazing kind of was part of that American middle of the top 10 pack, which was really awesome. But yeah, there are little mistakes to be made throughout there. And again, nutrition is a huge factor in this, I think, as well. I think because you do have to run so fast, you're burning a lot hotter. And I think if you are not getting those carbs in, it takes a toll on the back third of this race in a big way, where that tiny, stupid non-climb out of Vallorcine, if you're not on top of your nutrition,
climb, non-climb.
I was talking to Ludo about it, and Ludo's you can lose 20 minutes in that 4 kilometer section if you can't run it.
Very interesting. So to our viewers and listeners, it does favor the mountain runner with leg speed critically. Okay. Let's talk about some mountain runners with leg speed, shall we? Starting with the women, I guess let's start with the notable scratches like we did with OCC. Azara Garcia, unfortunately, not step into the start.
Is that a recent scratch?
It must be. She was the second ranked athlete by UTMB Index. So kind of a big loss for the field, for us fans. I hope Azara Garcia is doing okay. Candace Furton, also a notable scratch, and Meg Morgan, the American.
And then Meg McKenzie's, I think, probably the other notable scratch in that. Ranked a little bit lower, but Meg McKenzie is also listed as a scratch now as well.
Okay, so the people who are racing, in my mind, clear favorite on the women's side, Tony McCann. Who wants to talk about her?
My favorite one, no, not my favorite. One of my favorite humans. I probably can't pick favorites. Got to give her a big hug earlier today. Ray of Sunshine, lives in Annecy. Great mountain athlete, but stepping up. First 100K. Oh. But with we talked about this yesterday actually, a great mentor and leader guiding her. She's coached by teammate and former CCC champion Tom Evans. So I think that's got to give you a little bit of confidence going into this, right? That like you are being guided down this path. He also coaches Ingvild Kaspersen, who won CCC last year. On the women's side, Tony and Ingvild are super tight, really good friends. Tony paced and crewed Ingvild at Western States, so they've gotten to spend a good deal of time together this spring, which I think is really cool as well. Hopefully, kind of sharing some tips and tricks and secrets. But she's got a lot of teammates that have done well there as well, with Abby Hall in that mix. So I do think that she's set up really well to have a good day. She's diving into the unknown, which is always scary, but...
You know what's interesting? Yeah. She said that even though she's South African, but lives in France, as you mentioned, she has not done the Grand Col to Champé section.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it's interesting, right? Like, where people are like doing their homework, downloading the course, doing multiple laps. She obviously OCC champ last year, who lives locally, but who chose, made the intentional decision. I still want that part to be a surprise. Any comments from you on Tony?
Well, that's interesting that she hadn't seen that part of the course, because I feel like that is part of the course that would really suit her well with her speed. But it is kind of just a relentless long section.
Yeah.
You're just waiting for Champé. But Tony, after that insane performance last year, how can she not be a favorite in a race like CCC? I think with any shorter distance athlete moving up in distance, the question is how do they handle fueling, and how do they handle, just the extra hours out there on the legs. And if you're coached by Tom Evans, I'm sure you got that dialed in. So I'm excited to see how she does.
Yeah, obviously talented and has great leadership from people who've been successful here. Even though it is her debut, I would say Tony McCann comes in as the clear favorite in the CCC race. The next highest ranked athlete in the field is actually Heather Jackson. She was 20th at OCC last year.
That was her first ever Chamonix UTMB Finals Week experience, and I think it was eye-opening.
Yeah, definitely eye-opening. Heather Jackson, we all know, had an illustrious career as an Ironman triathlete, and who has now taken both the gravel racing and trail racing scenes by storm in the last couple of years, but definitely inexperienced on these types of courses. I'd say if I were her, I would basically sprint from the top of the Grand Col to Champé. Yeah. Just really take advantage of that fast stretch.
Yeah, the start will
such a disadvantage.
Yeah, the start will suit her well too. Like that fast start will feel more comfy.
Yeah,
for her.
On the balcony, I would sprint that section. Is
that the advice you're giving her, Heather?
Heather,
you need to
if you're listening, sprint those fast sections, because that last 50K is super mountainous.
I'm just looking through this, and while there are some really good returners and contenders, the women's CCC race feels a little bit open in a way. But before diving into that, you do still have HOKA, the Vietnamese athlete who was fourth last year. Emily Schmitz, who was fifth last year, who got the roll down golden ticket from HOKA to do Western States. Additionally in that, Emily Svan Avis, who's
eighth last year.
Who was eighth last year, but was in this epic battle for the longest time. It was Emily Hawgood, Emily Svan Avis, Emily Forsberg, and Emily Schmitz. And I was like, I don't know who's coming in next, but it will be an Emily because it was part of that group. She's had a great early season though. She's been in Europe for a while. She won the 80K at Lavaredo, ran a really smart race, moved up all day, kind of took advantage of people falling apart late in the race. So she's got good kind of mountain legs, but has been working on her leg speed. So kind of interesting to see those top 10 athletes from last year returning. But I think Sylvia Nordskar might also be a debut at the 100K distance, a Golden Trail standout, super, super talented, incredibly strong athlete.
Norwegian.
Yeah.
They make great endurance athletes up there in the Nordic countries, especially.
Yeah, we've got Jasmine Lowther returning to CCC after kind of struggling with some injury, but seems
I wanted to talk about her.
I got to see her earlier today, and she's excited.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because I just watched her race at...
She ran great at Speedgo.
Yeah, she crushed it. She was coming back from some injury. I think that was her first race back in a while, but a really good mountain athlete and with leg speed because we've seen her show off that leg speed at Canyon. So I view Jasmine Lowther as the archetype CCC winner type athlete, right?
And she was in that amazing, amazing battle when Abby was second in Abbey Hall.
Didn't she drop out that year? 2 years ago.
No. Jasmine ran incredibly strong. I think she finished fourth at CCC that year.
CCC.
Yeah. She didn't start Western States. She'd gotten a golden ticket into Western States at Canyons, was injured, didn't start, but ran CCC and was fourth. And she was closing. Like I thought that she was going to catch, I thought she was going to move onto the podium. I thought she was going to catch Abby. Like it was an all out drag out battle over the final, 20K of that race. So I think that, if we're seeing a Jasmine Lowther return to form, I think that is a super interesting individual to keep our eye on. My phone is formatted so funny, so I can't tell you how this woman did at the 120K at Lavaredo. But we wanted to also mention someone I think that's important to mention is
Rosanna.
Yeah, she ran an amazing race at Lavaredo.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
but dropped out of CCC last year.
Right, yeah, and she's had good results this year. She actually just raced a couple weeks ago, I guess. Yeah, at Gross. I'm not going to butcher that. Yeah, Grossglockner.
Yeah, and a cool race in Austria.
Yeah.
Do you know much about her?
No, I just based off of looking at results over this last year. I mean, it seems like she's on fire right now. So.
I think she performed super well at Worlds in.
I'll pull it up.
Yeah,
I was going to actually mention this too, because one of the fun things I always like to do during UTMB week is just like analyze the countries and how they perform. And it feels like Germany's really on the up and up right now. Hannes Naumburger, Katharina Hartmuth, Rosanna Bouchard.
Yeah, she was fifth at Worlds in Innsbruck in the long trail.
And we also mentioned Daniela Omis, who is a German athlete. So
they're coming up.
Yeah, Germany absolutely starting to produce like they have in cycling and triathlon here in the trail running world too. We haven't mentioned MK Sullivan.
Yes, second 100K ever. The Subhub podcast going ultra on us.
Heck yeah. So MK was in Marin. We went for a little training run together. I only, hung out for like an hour of her and her husband Tommy's like 6-hour epic that they did in Marin when they were escaping some smoky conditions back home in Reno. But MK second at Canyons. Yeah, this is a very different 100K than the one she experienced in Northern California, but obviously MK's got all the talent she needs to be competitive for those podium positions that are so coveted here. Maybe to shout out some other Americans, we got Riley Brady. We mentioned
saw them earlier. They are also stoked to race, and
Ryan's been hanging with Ryan. Haven't you been hanging with Riley's parents like all week?
Like every day.
Yeah.
We got coffee this morning.
I love
Ryan
that.
got coffee with Ann and Bill Brady. Shout out Ann and Bill Brady.
Ann Brady's amazing. I've had the pleasure of emailing with Ann Brady, and she's the mom that we all want. I think most of us have great moms, but Ann Brady is amazing. Yeah. But yeah, saw Riley earlier. They're really excited. And I think, honestly, this course suits Riley really well. Lives in Boulder, trains in the mountains, but we've seen them race phenomenally well at a race like Javelina, which I mentioned. I think the Javelina 100-mile athlete can do really well on this type of course. Knowing that they also have some, mountain experience, this could be a really, really awesome race for Riley.
Awesome. We mentioned Emily Smits, Emelise Von Avis, Aaron Clark we haven't mentioned, Mally Noyes, who I was just introduced to at Speedgoat a few weeks ago, was on the podium there.
Professional skier.
Professional, like free skier, not like ski mountaineer.
Big mountain
Cool.
freestyle skier. Yeah, total. Was a Nordic skier and then moved to Utah and turned into a big mountain skier.
I'm a fan of hers, and she to me feels like one of those athletes who could make a mark here this week. Lottie Brinks, somebody I know we are all big fans of, definitely rooting for Lottie. You know, we'll adopt her as an American, even though she's part of, you know, the half and half in the German contingent.
Yeah. Catherine Gotz, who is always super solid, really, really strong. Swiss athlete Sarah Kais, I saw earlier, who's incredibly talented. Arden Young, who was in a battle for a top 10 finish here last year, has been kind of right on that top 10 cusp a number of times. I think Arden and Tara Fraga had a throwdown at the end of this race last year with Tara just holding her off maybe to sneak those last top 10 spots. So a fit Arden here could do really well. Holly Page is really, really talented, has been dealing with like just the series of the worst luck possible over the last 3 or 4 years, injuries, illness.
British,
needed surgery, got sepsis from surgery, just like the absolute most insane story possible. Yeah. But a healthy Holly Page over 100K distance, again, very solid contender.
Awesome.
But it feels a little bit open.
Closing comments on the women?
Yeah, I think just what stands out is Aaron Clark is back at CCC, and I think in pretty good form. And what was it, 2 years ago, she had a really good race here. So that's somebody I'm going to be keeping my eye on and see how she ends up.
Yep. And her partner, Adam Peterman, also in CCC this week. So that'll be a fun storyline to follow. Two great American athletes. Moving to the men. As we mentioned, Tony McCann, in our minds, the clear favorite in the women's race. The men's race, to me, no clear favorite. Where I wanted to start is something that we omitted yesterday. Manuel Marias, the great Spaniard. We neglected to mention him in our conversation about debutantes. Manuel Marias, we will all know, has dominated in sky running, in Golden Trail. He's been an OCC champion, has never run 100K. Matt, I know you've got some insight or at least some inspiration drawn from Manuel in his career, and you said it, your pick to win.
Yeah, I mean, I hate betting against any of my good friends who are in this race, and Hayden. Come on, I know you can get him, but Manuel is just so strong and on the downhill. So if he can put it together for a sub 10-hour race, I don't know how you beat him, especially on a course like this. One thing that really stood out to me, and I don't know if Hayden will appreciate me saying this, but I'm going to say it here publicly. Hayden said the one runner he's like the most concerned about would be Manuel, just because there's a little bit of an unknown with this distance, but he knows what he's capable of, and that's a really, really, really fit Hayden saying that. So that's an exciting storyline for me to see like how that's going to shape up.
Corrine, anything you want to add?
It's a great field, and also notably in this field too, I think is a really strong group of American men. We mentioned that yesterday. The U.S. men in particular coming into CCC are just really, really solid. We've got former CCC winner in Hayden Hawks. We've got the return of Adam Peterman.
Let's talk about Hayden.
Yeah.
Do you have any insight on him? You guys are tight buddies. He was here yesterday.
He's been in Europe since like 2 weeks after Western States.
Right. We did an interview yesterday, and it's clear, he's classic Hayden Hawks. He's healthy. He's super fit. He's super confident, and he's the ultimate competitor. You guys are homies. Take us into some of the conversations you've had.
Yeah, I think he's, he had that surgery after Western States last year, and then came back to Black Canyon. Was fit at Black Canyon, but not himself, which is crazy, especially after that performance to say that. But got a little bit of an injury after Black Canyon and took a few weeks where it took him a while to kind of get back into things before Western States again. So he said right around Western States, he was finally starting to feel more like himself again. And then just over the last few weeks, he was like, I'm back. And so, Hayden's won this race before. And of course, this race is a little bit different now than it was in 2017 when he won. But I think, when Hayden's confident, he typically knows where his fitness is. And it's going to be exciting to see, he just ran a 50K maybe
in Austria.
The Cats.
Yeah,
Cats 50K. Yeah. And that course was brutal, and they had some really rough weather too, and ran really well. I don't know what the competition was like, but he won that race. So I think right in the middle of a big training week too. So ready to roll.
Awesome.
Yeah, that to me is incredibly exciting. And a confident Hayden is a scary Hayden. I think he's like one of the few people in this field who I feel like could like play with their food a little bit. Like, I think that he can kind of like, I don't want to say sit and kick, but I do think that he could potentially really be in control of this race.
Like he will be in contact at Champs-Élysées.
Yeah, 100%.
And then it's those last 3 climbs, right?
If you want some fun stuff to look at, go on to Strava. He did a little workout on that climb out of Triant.
He talked about it yesterday, where he doubled it.
He doubled it, and he crushed Jim's best time on that from a couple years ago. But just, I mean, really pretty relaxed, like a decent heart rate. Like the statistics on that Strava file are disgusting. And so, yeah, if you want some fun stuff to look at what he's been doing the last 3 weeks.
I can't wait to go look at that Strava file.
You're like, this is going to make me feel bad.
Good grief. It reminds me, all 3 of us were together at Black Canyon this year doing the shows, right?
Yeah.
So everything blurs together this time.
And remember, we were also like, wow, what is Hayden going to do it?
Remember
Can he do
in
it?
the post-race show, it was like, all right, my takeaway, never bet against Hayden Hawks because he was coming back from injury that year. I like left him off my fantasy team.
Yeah, we were so wishy-washy. We're like, he's going to win it or he's not going to finish. Like we were so confident in our prediction there.
I was like, okay, this is the most competitive 100K ever in North America. You know, Hayden, how's he doing? Coming back from injury, and he wins it. And then also at Western States, came in with a compressed time frame. He had 10 weeks to train after that little injury that he got after Black Canyon, Matt just mentioned, and he comes and runs 14:24 at Western States. Never bet against Hayden Hawks. Petter Engdahl, the course record holder.
Yeah, former champion.
You got any intel on Petter?
So Matt came in here talking a big game about how Petter's injured.
The rumors in this valley are insane.
Rumor Mill Valley.
Rumor Mill Valley. That's the new name for the Chamonix Valley.
I think he's in a good spot. I think that Western States was a big psychological day for him. He had never completed a 100-mile race. It was going to be, a big effort for him. He got to share some special moments with like Emily Hawgood on course, for example, which is not a position I think he was like expecting to find himself in. He took a big fall. There was like an initial ankle tweak, but he's been home. The plan was to stay home longer this year in Norway. He was in the Chamonix Valley, the Rumor Mill Valley, for much of last summer, and recognizing that he actually like really likes home and the training there's pretty good and his community there's pretty good and that's where his partner is. And so to get to spend time at home, I think was really grounding and settling. And so I think that he's coming in actually a pretty good place. I think that there's initial pressure to do UTMB again and recognizing that wasn't a good idea for him and stepping down to CCC, I think kind of allowed him to exhale a little bit to like wrap his brain around. It's still going to be a battle. It's still going to be a race. And we've seen how hard Petter can dig is the thing. Like he came over to Canyons. He was kind of in that lead group and then he fell way off and we're like, wow, he's not going to pull it off. And then we saw how hard he rallied in like the final 20K of that race. So I do think that, are we going to see 2022 Petter Engdahl? Like, I don't know.
That was such a sick performance.
That was such an insane run.
It's funny, after we stopped recording the interview with Hayden, we started talking about, the course records and stuff like that. And Hayden had done all the analysis on the splits and stuff. And he said Petter was climbing like an absolute savage that day. Like he made up all the time against the previous course record on the climbs, basically. And that if you compare whatever Jonathan Albin did last year, like he matched what Petter did on the descents, but Petter was just climbing out of his mind.
Yeah, and he is. He's a VO2 max animal, right? He's this like former Nordic skier, like kind of compact dude, and he can climb really, really well. And so I'm kind of curious to see what that looks like out there. But yeah, he's the other returning champion in this subset. And I also think that we mentioned this yesterday. We've got this like interesting influx of the Western States to CCC pipeline on the men's side. Petter being included in that, Hayden being included in that, Rod Farvard being included in that, Dan Jones being included in that, Dakota Jones included in that. He was another kind of step down to this race. Jonathan Ray, who I just saw recently, in that bunch. And I think that is Caleb Olson. If he is here and healthy, that to me is a really interesting, I think Yu Pei Quen as well, the Chinese athlete, was also a Western States to CCC, carryover. But I do think that Cole Watson as well. that to me is interesting. Like that is I think a practical double and a good double. And I'm curious to see that lineup show up here again.
Yeah. Awesome. So we mentioned all the American depth on the men's side yesterday, so we don't need to go too deep into it. One person I did want to spend a second on is Caleb Olson, because I really want to get to know this guy a little bit better. I've actually never even spoken to him, but he's a beast. And he finished second at Ultra Trail Cape Town last year. And I said erroneously on some Western States
We both did, yeah.
that was his international debut, not knowing that he's actually run CCC twice.
Yeah.
So Caleb Olson coming off an amazing 5th place run at Western States here, showing up looking to
best Western States debut ever. 1440, just nasty.
Yeah. So Caleb Olson, really excited to see what he does. And this is the type of place where like someone like Caleb Olson, if he lands on the podium, all of a sudden he's an international sensation, right? Like it can make your career. And he's the type of guy where, you know, he's in the early phases of building that career. And when you execute on this stage, your whole life can change, really. And you could see that happening for him. We also haven't mentioned Dan Jones. Yeah. And I talked with Hayden about him yesterday and have had a chance to interact with Dan a bit myself, the Kiwi shred beast, and somebody who has all the talent to win or finish on the podium here.
I saw him at lunch earlier today, and we were talking about how we've told the guys that the Western States to UTMB double is a horrible pipeline and they should all stop doing it, and the women are doing it and doing it well. Yeah. And Dan's like, yeah, I figured that out the hard way last year. So I think he's also really excited to be in CCC. Yeah. So, and again, there's that great like Hayden, Hawks, Dan Jones training partnership and friendship. So really excited to see him run.
We can start wrapping up here, but also I just put a couple of the European names down here because we haven't really spoken about a ton of the Europeans except for Petter and Manuel. But Andreas Reiterer, who's a super consistent guy, who's almost like a 100K specialist. He's been on the podium here at CCC. Andreo Simon Ermich, also a great athlete. I think he won Trans Gran Canaria this year. Peter Frano was on the podium of the World Championship a couple of years ago. Slovakian. So just a few of the Euros who crush.
Is this Peter Frano kind of stepping up in distance? Because he's talked about wanting to step up in distance, like he's going to leave the Golden Trail World Series.
Yeah. I know he and Hayden have done a lot of training together because Hayden has gone and stayed and trained in Slovakia. So Peter Frano, a young up-and-comer.
Hugo Deck's also another really interesting character. He's raced for the French national team at Trail Worlds. He historically has not done well during UTMB week, but will absolutely crush races outside of that. Super young French guy, was like, I'm going to do TDS, I'm going to do UTMB. And I was like, man, you could crush CCC, right? A young Adidas Terex athlete. And so I'm really excited to see Hugo race CCC. I do think it's super fitting for him. He's an incredibly fast athlete, high VO2 max, super aerobically sound, has a big engine. And so he just hasn't been able to stick it at UTMB finals in the last couple years, like leading to a number of DNFs, for example. I think he DNF'd UTMB at Courmayeur last year, DNF'd TDS the year before. So I'd love to see him stick CCC.
Sweet. Any closing comments on the men, Matt?
I mean...
Dude, we got to get you a bib.
Dude, I wish I was in this race. You could literally flip a coin.
I wish you were in this race.
It could be any of these guys. But yeah, maybe we'll be out here next year.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, let's wrap up by just talking about some racing that is happening today and right now. So we talked about ETC yesterday. This was one of our storylines of the week, so it makes sense to close that loop here, to close the show here today. Again, our hypothesis yesterday was that ETC will become more and more of a thing here during UTMB week, the 15-kilometer race that happens in Courmayeur, expanding the UTMB series to a much shorter distance. On the women's side, maybe we'll just tick through the podiums here. On the women's side, it was Annelle Bondeau, who is an athlete who I'm very excited to learn more about. French athlete. She won the European Championships in the up-down race this year. This was basically a similar course to that. An up-down course, again, in Courmayeur. Maud Mathis, the great Swiss champion, in second place, about 2 minutes back. And then Vivian Bonzi, an Italian, finishing in third. In the men's race, it was Lucas Earl, a German, all right, German athlete, finished about 2 minutes ahead of Alex Garcia Carrillo. And then Daniel Pattis, the great Italian runner, was in third place. And yeah, tight finishes as expected in these very short distance races. It looks like the men's podium was only separated by 2 minutes total. I don't know really much about a lot of these characters aside from Daniel Pattis and Maud Mathis, but I'm very much looking forward to looking into them. And these likely are the names of the future.
Yeah.
I want to give a huge shout out to Mika.
Oh, right.
Rizal, who ran this. He was fourth place, and the guy hasn't run all summer. He's been out with a knee injury for months, and just comes out a few weeks ago to run Sierra Zanol, and now this, and it's obvious he's going to be a mega talent if he stays healthy and continues to, keep staying on the trails.
Yeah, I mean, Henry Anamondo, who finished right behind him, is a very well-known name in the world, like Mountain Running Association races. So it's a great group of athletes, and it's really cool to see, these are athletes that are here with, those top 5 athletes are here with teams, right? Asics, Brooks, the North Face. So it's cool to see these teams investing in this younger kind of next gen talent.
Absolutely. So the other race that's happening right now is TDS, the 145K race that has been around as part of the UTMB festival of events for many years. In fact, Corrine and I have both done the race. It's a fantastic event, and it's not quite as competitive as it used to be, being overshadowed, I think, by the World Final events, but just amazing. One of the best race courses I've ever run. And I just want to do a quick update here before we wrap up. It looks like the men's winner is expected here in Chamonix in 37 minutes. That's Thibaut Marquette, who has a big lead right now over Albin Burson, who's in second place. And then Simone Gosselin, is in third place now.
He's moved up into third. That's awesome.
He's moved up into third. And Simone, it's funny, we just had Remy Bonnet in here for a pre-race interview. Simone Gosselin is Remy Bonnet's coach. You know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. So competing at a very high level himself. He lives in that Aresh.
Yeah, he just recently, in the last 18 months or so, picked up an On kind of sponsorship partnership. And so really cool to see. He's notably was Jim's training partner in Beaufort, and picked up a golden ticket into Western States at Nice last year. So cool to see him moving up into the podium at TDS. But yeah, I wish TDS is such a funky race because it's too long for it to be its own championship event here at finals. They were going to kill it completely a couple of years ago.
I heard they were going to move it earlier in the summer.
Yeah, we that's what we had kind of heard. They were either going to kill it all together, or they were going to move it to a different time of the summer season, because it's a great course, but it's too long for it to really now at this point for it to be differentiated from UTMB. When it was 120K, that made more sense, and it was still gnarly then. But now it's 85 miles with the same amount of climbing as UTMB.
It's 95 miles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, awesome race, awesome course. This Thibaut Marquette, man, he's got a huge lead. I just pulled up his results. This would definitely be the biggest achievement of his career. So on the women's side, real quick, an update before we wind down here. Looks like Marie Doyne from France is in first. Ariane Wilhelm from Switzerland is in second, and Celine Finas from France is in third.
An interesting note there is that 1 and 3 are both Kip Run athletes. Kip Run's kind of the decathlon run side of the brand, and they really are professionalizing a lot. They've got some road and track and field athletes now. They've got a really cool women's trail running team kind of headed by Blondine, or is kind of their feature.
And Clementine Jeffrey, I think.
As a kind of Blondine's been kind of the feature athlete of that group. But it's cool to see what they're doing. They signed an NIL deal with an American athlete this past year too.
No way.
Yeah. So, super curious to keep an eye on Kip Run in general, because I do think that they're moving into the run space, in a more investing type way.
Awesome. Closing comments from the panel before we wind down for the day.
Get mad at Bib.
Let's go.
No, it's every time we do this, I just get more and more excited. So I feel like it's just can't wait to watch it all.
Heck yeah. Corrine?
I host this thing with you so that we can reinvigorate Matt Daniels' running career.
Yes.
It's a selfish act. A selfless act. It is a selfish act.
It is very hard to be here and not run. As fun as it is to do these shows, it's difficult to watch everybody else have all the fun. But Next year, maybe we'll pin some bibs on
Be all
ourselves.
3 of us. Yeah.
Be
we'll all
careful
wind
what
up.
you're good at.
ETC, you know, I might be able
Yeah,
to.
that'd be
I might
fun.
even be able to finish a 15K at this point in my career. That'd be
Come on,
amazing.
man. You just crushed a 50K a few weeks ago. So.
Not to brag. All right. Well, a big thank you to our audience for joining us here again today. While you're here, make sure you subscribe to the channel, please. We would definitely appreciate that very much. Also, make sure you go play fantasy, fantasy.freetrail.com. Pick 10 deep in OCC, CCC, and UTMB. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing the full UTMB preview. That's going to take some energy. Obviously, a big thank you to the team behind the scenes. Tony with a Sony, Ryan with a Fuji, our favorite dudes here. Amazing chats, guys. Appreciate it so much. Audience, hope you guys appreciated it too. Au revoir. Peace out.